most athletic with the highest upside in the draft, Ben Mclemore.
McLemore has a chance to be a perennial all-star. He has that talent.
Ben Edward Mclemore III, born February 11th, 1993. In an ESPN article, Ben Mclemore imagined a different circumstance to begin his NBA career where a different franchise drafted him. One more stable, one that didn't have 3 coaches in his first 4 seasons, saying he's thought about it every day that maybe in better situations he could have been a more successful NBA player. He added that so much is about being in the right place at the right time, and to that he couldn't be more spot on. It's like that in all walks of life, but specifically in basketball, that sentiment can make or break a player and alter his legacy. In professional sports, it's what you give up when you decide to sign up for being in a system of drafting players to teams without the player having any say in where they initially end up. That player is usually locked in for 4 or more years, where a lot can happen that prohibits them from attaining the all-important second contract that leads to financial and career security. When you leave school early as an amateur, situations become even more important, as in the case of today's feature. Of course, it's not that simple to say that Ben Mclemore would have had a better career had he been drafted by a different team in 2013 when the Sacramento Kings took him 7th overall in the draft in front of 2 All-Stars and likely future Hall of Famers, Giannis Antetokounmpo and Rudy Gobert, because at the end of the day, the player ultimately controls his own destiny by the amount of talent they have and the work they put in on their own to develop that talent. Because one thing life has taught me that I can pass down to young hoopers or young people in general who want to excel in life with no excuses attached to it is life will give you exactly what you give it, and time is not as forgiving as you think. You have to be diligent in your focus and work ethic from day one, especially today, as competitive as it is to actually make the NBA. You can't lack any of those for a second, or someone that didn't will surpass you and change life for you and your family for generations. Yes, Ben Mclemore had it tough having to see a coach in Mike Malone, who he loved, leave after just his 2nd year, and yes, the franchise brought in other players at his position when he began to underperform, but this was a guy given a 7th overall pick opportunity. How many players in the history of the world can say they were drafted top 7 overall into one of the most coveted leagues in the world? With that opportunity, Ben Mclemore failed to live up to the hype he had leaving Kansas compared to Hall of Famer Ray Allen, and thought to be the saving piece for DeMarcus Cousins and the Sacramento Kings. Some had him a locked future star in the league, but for these reasons, that never happened. What did? Let's talk about it. Salute to Top Tier Podcast for this request. It's your boy JC Stunted Growth. Let's get it, man. Take a minute to like, subscribe, and comment on who I should do next. Ben Mclemore is a 6'3" shooting guard from St. Louis, Missouri that since preschool can remember writing it down on paper that he wanted to become an NBA player. His road in high school was traveled, to say the least, playing for 3 different high schools in 4 years, which caused, quote, fuzziness in his transcripts that later made him ineligible as a true freshman in college to compete right away. When he did play in high school, he was tremendous. He was named an All-Metro selection by the St. Louis Post-Dispatch as a junior, averaging 28.3 points, 12.7 rebounds, 6.2 assists, 2.6 steals, and 2.3 blocks on the 09-10 season before the school was closed down. His senior year, he'd split time with Oak Hill Academy and Christian Life High School, where he was ranked the 13th best shooting guard in the country by 247. He entered Kansas and sat out his true freshman year, first suiting up for the 12-13 season, his lone as a Jayhawk. Stunt number 1, losing Mike Malone. After researching Ben Mclemore, one thing was clear is that he was a very family-oriented guy that valued that family atmosphere going into Kansas and expected that in the NBA. Maybe naive in that way, but it led to the amount of comfort he felt with the team, and it in turn affected the way he played on the court. For Ben, he saw Mike Malone as more than just his first professional coach. He and Malone had a bond where they both were in new territory, Ben a first-year pro and Malone a first-year head coach. Having direct input in selecting Ben Mclemore in the draft, and Ben appreciating the attention to development Mike Malone instilled in the franchise as leader, the two grew fond of each other and had plans to help each other rise the ranks and hopefully lead Sacramento to championship contention. When Ben lost Mike Malone due to him being fired December 14, 2014, he first received a phone call from Malone himself informing him of the news and encouraging him to continue working on developing his game. The two shared a moment where Ben says he felt like crying, knowing his coach was out the door after the Kings began the 14-15 season 11-13, a season after being one of the worst in the league. And this is one of those instances Ben talked about where situations can make or break a career. A player who held so much value in player connection and having someone there to direct his development, losing that can give them a feeling of lost. Add to that, the team then goes on to run through 3 coaches by May 2016, creating the feeling of instability within the franchise, always in rebuild mode of sorts, that becomes complacent with losing and starting over. Ben also lost a coach that believed in him and helped him to a career year in 14-15, where things were never the same again. He says the organization, after Malone, lost focus on teaching and player on-court development. For example, Malone would let young players play through mistakes, whereas thereafter he'd be yanked out of games by George Karl and others and not get to correct those mishaps on the fly. Losing a coach like Malone so early in his career was a huge loss for Ben Mclemore. Stunt number 2, the organization lost faith in Ben. The 15-16 season was a huge one for Ben Mclemore. He was coming off losing his head coach but still playing all 82 games, something he had done in back-to-back seasons, and a career year averaging 12 points a game and starting every game. This was the last time I'd say Sacramento had Mclemore still in their sights as their shooting guard of the future. During the 15-16 season, Ben would endure a few injuries to his wrist and finger, and playing for a new coach in the veteran-friendly George Karl, who wasn't like Malone and into developing young talent. Karl and the Kings wanted to win now, and Ben just wasn't moving at the pace they thought would allow them to do that. He ended up having his worst season as a King under Karl, failing to show significant improvement and return on the organization's 7th overall pick investment in now his 3rd year. So in February 2017, the Kings began to place the writing on the wall. They traded for rookie shooting guard Buddy Hield, and a year later another shooting guard Bogdan Bogdanovic, signaling Ben Mclemore's limited future with the franchise. The Kings declined Mclemore's qualifying offer in the summer of 2017, and he chose to sign with the Memphis Grizzlies to play for player development-friendly David Fizdale. After that, he hasn't played for a team longer than a season since, excluding the Rockets, who he played 103 games for. Not only did the Kings, as an organization, see that the undersized shooting guard with bad hands and poor off-ball defense didn't play make for teammates and a streaky shooter at best, other teams saw that as well and didn't keep him around. Stunt number 3, he lost confidence in himself. It took Ben Mclemore running into Kobe Bryant in 2019 to finally restore the confidence he had lost along the way after so many coaches and teams had given up on him to that point. Kobe told him at the Mamba Skills Academy to keep working, and one day his time would come. Standard encouragement, but it meant the world to Ben, because before that he started to read and believe in the hype that he was most certainly an NBA bust. He literally said that he'd see articles and news clippings that Ben Mclemore was a bust and would ask himself, am I? Maybe I am. After his time in Memphis, he was traded back to the Kings and played 19 games before they waived him and sent him packing once again. From February 2019 to July that year, Ben Mclemore was without an NBA job. Houston picked him up and gave him a run, but the team grew exhausted with Ben's off-ball defense, where he couldn't understand the concept of seeing his man and the ball at the same time. Teams constantly went backdoor on him, presenting a liability on that end and ultimately on the team's outcome. They too waived him in 2021. He continued averaging around 7 to 8 points a game and never really developed his game in no other area other than shooting threes like he prided himself on early in his career. He had stints with the Lakers and Portland thereafter, but was out the league by 2022, off to China, Greece, and Spain, where he's 31 and likely out the league for good. Confidence is the most important thing a player has. When Ben Mclemore lost his, he lost it all. All in all, Ben Mclemore's story is a lot about the bright-eyed, naive basketball player that didn't understand the gravity of his situation soon enough and the results of poorly suited circumstances. He needed and maybe wanted to be coddled leaving early from Kansas, and the NBA is not the league for that. You develop on your own or else. Hyped prospect reached for too early, and for these reasons, his growth was stunted. Salute, much respect. It's your boy JC Stunted Growth, and I'm out.